All right, top of the morning to you, afternoon, evening, whatever time you might be listening to this voice note. My name is Chad Milam. I'm a director of Disaster Relief CERT being the Community Emergency Response Teams, and today is the 10th of March, 2026, and that's coming up for 0940 for record purposes. Yesterday I was asked a question following a statement, so let's just read it out and then I'd like to respond. So the statement in question was, there's a lot of talk going around about citing price increases on fuel up to approximately R8.50 per litre, which would out and out become a national disaster. In such a case, should it happen, where would your organisation stand? All right, so let's firstly have a look at the statement that this would out and out become a national disaster. Actually, there's nothing to state that that will become a national disaster, because this is where the very first problem lies within local communities. Everything that is problematic today is termed a disaster. The word and phrase disaster is thrown around very loosely and without any justification or purpose behind it. And where people don't seem to grasp, unfortunately, the concept and difference between what a disaster is and what an emergency is, I think it is fair to say that we need to have a look at the definitions as they are included in the Disaster Management Act or in terms of any other national legislation or even international legislation, and what is considered to be an emergency and what is considered to be a disaster. Now, up front, I was also yesterday informed that I've got to go and AI Google it in order to provide an answer. I mean, really, that there is just so out of sync, it's unbelievable, and people are not taking the concept of having disasters occur in a serious light at all, unfortunately. So that being said, an emergency is a life-threatening situation or incident that requires immediate and urgent attention or action. That is the definition of an emergency. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to do this voice note, but then I'm also going to upload it into, I think it's Uniscribe, for a text version, so that I can have my voice note converted into a text version for those that prefer to read it and, for those that would like to listen to it. So when we are looking at an emergency, these are the incidents that occur on a day-to-day basis. And emergencies are ultimately dealt with by the local municipality or the local government services within the area. And those municipalities and services will, in actual fact, have a look at demographics and the overall population growth within, or population within their municipal boundaries or districts or whatever the case might be. And they will do a rough estimate and say, well, we anticipate to have X amount of motor vehicle accidents and so many medical cases and everything else, all part and parcel of the overall planning and being prepared to be able to deal with and assist community members and residents and the population at large in terms of having like heart attacks, motor vehicle accidents, house fires, whatever the case might be. So in essence, these municipalities will decide, okay, well, we can handle so many cases, even though there might be a delay of 1 to 2 hours in some instances before treatment is provided. We need so many fire trucks, so many of this, so many tankers, so many ambulances, so many response vehicles, etc., and they do a calculation on that basis. However, this now becomes a little bit different when we start looking at what a disaster is. And in terms of the Disaster Management Act, as well as other legislation globally, for example, the International Telecommunications Union itself, for communication purposes, also has a definition for a disaster, and they're much the same. So from a legislative point of view, a disaster is a progressive or sudden, widespread or localized, natural or human-caused occurrence, which causes or threatens to cause death, injury, or disease. Point one. Or to cause damage to property, infrastructure, or the environment. Or significant disruption of the life of a community. And this is the critical part when we start looking at the definition of a disaster, and is of a magnitude that exceeds the ability of those affected by the disaster to cope with its effects, using only their own resources. Now, what that means is, based on those calculations and estimates that are discussed regarding emergencies, when a municipality is presented with a large-scale event or incident, and with their own resources and the help of the community and those affected, when they are unable to actually cope or deal with the situation, then and only then does it become considered to be a disaster, at which point the minister can, in actual fact, and through the head of the department of the National Disaster Management Centre or the Provincial Disaster Management Centre or the Municipal Disaster Management Centre, the head of the department could, in actual fact, declare a certain area to be a disaster. And the purpose of doing it this way is that at the time of those declarations, it does open up the capability in terms of legislation of providing additional resources, providing additional assistance from other aspects of government, as well as to release emergency funds, etc., to either deal with the sudden or progressive impact of a disaster, or alternatively to release funds for the rebuilding and restructuring that is required post a disaster itself. And this, again, I must be quite open and honest. A lot of people believe that this, unfortunately, is inappropriate or whatever the case might be, but it does not, in actual fact, fall within their belief system. And if somebody falls down the stairs, well, then it should be declared a disaster. No, it's not where disasters are declared. Is it disastrous to the person affected or the community affected, like fires out in the agricultural farmlands? Yes, it is. Does it have an impact on the farmer, the landowner? Yes, it does. Can it have an effect on other people in and around the area? Absolutely, it can. Even air pollution itself can have an effect. But is it a disaster? Well, that will be determined by the simple rule of whether it causes or threatens to cause death, injury, or disease, damage to the property, infrastructure, environment, or significant disruption of the life of a community, and is of a magnitude. There is no full stop after of the life of a community. It continues and said, is of a magnitude that exceeds the ability of those affected. Okay, so hopefully this will provide some insight into the difference between an emergency and a disaster. So going back on the original question, that in the event that petrol is increased at R8.50 per litre, that's with the immediate effect. I mean, for as long as this war continues in the Middle East, that could even exceed R8.50 per litre on a month-to-month basis, depending on how long the war actually goes on. So let's just work on that R8.50 per litre. When we have a look at this, it's going to affect everybody and everything. There's no question about it. R8.50 per litre, food's going to go up, water's going to go up, electricity's going to go up. Well, again, are we going to have water and are we going to have electricity? These are all questions that need to be asked. So when we have a look at fuel going up R8.50 per litre, do you really think government or any sphere of government will declare a national, municipal or provincial disaster because of the fact that, fuel has gone up? And initially the answer is no, they won't. because they're going to expect the communities ultimately to be able to carry the cost. And that is where we now need to start looking at, well, what happens when communities can't carry the costs? Well, unfortunately, we're going to end up with what's called a cascading events that occur as a result of the fuel going up. Like I said, food prices are going to go up. Transport costs are going to go up. Now you're going to find that people that are running transport companies can't continue to run these companies because of the fact they can't afford the fuel, and they're not being paid by the suppliers or even by their customers to carry their costs. That means that farmers are not going to be able to, well, to start off with, a lot of farmers are actually utilizing diesel, for example, possibly to run their boreholes in order to water their crops so that our food is supplied via, the growth from that water aspect coming out of the borehole. So we could find farmers now are not able to, in actual fact, pump water, and therefore the yield on the crop is going to be a lot lower. So part and parcel of the overall cascading event taking place, we are going to see secondary events occurring like no food. We also are going to see that municipalities, for example, might not be able to supply generators to provide electricity when infrastructure fails, or in the event of Eskom having to shut down and certain plants and where they were running diesel generators, they might not have that money to run those diesel generators. So you can see now that there's a lot of things that are actually taking place on that front. Will government declare disaster? Who knows? We will only know when the government declares a disaster at that point, not a minute sooner. So the first part of the question the question I'd like to answer in part one, and I want to split this into maybe 2 or 3 parts. In such a case, should it happen, where would your organization stand? Well, no disaster. We still continue to monitor. We still continue to provide guidance. We still continue to watch out, look out for, speak with communities, gather intelligence regarding other risks that might be creeping in as a result of such a price hike, etc., etc., etc. But as an organization, we have no responsibility to, in actual fact, respond to the fact that fuel prices have gone up. I mean, it would be ludicrous to think that as a disaster relief organization, we would be, for example, expected to now supply fuel at cheaper prices. Residents, group members, community members, community leaders, etc., group administrators on social media, you guys need to be realistic, and gals for that matter. People need to be realistic and understand that you don't take your car to Dis-Chem to have it serviced. So it doesn't help now shouting at Dis-Chem because of the fact that they refuse to service your car. They're not there to do that. We are not here to deal with providing, for example, cheaper fuel prices or fuel at a cheaper price overall. And it is on this basis that I still maintain people need to be realistic right across the board. I said I wanted to split this into 2 answers to the question. Okay, now let's have a look at something on a realistic level. Being a national organization, we have to look at things across the country and not just in one specific area. However, we still need to drill down into each individual area, each suburb, each street, each province. It has to be done and across all levels, whichever way we look at it. So our purpose as Disaster Relief CERT, our goal is ultimately to have volunteers from local communities, registered volunteers from local communities, who will be provided specific training, for example, in radio communications or in induction in terms of what we stand for, where we operate, how we operate, etc. But other areas such as providing evacuation shelter management capabilities or disaster area damage assessments that need to be carried out, risk assessments, vulnerability assessments, etc., etc. And in order to do that, we are of the opinion that within a specific geographic area of maybe, let's say, 2 to 4 square kilometers, we need a minimum of at least 10 volunteers who have an understanding of what needs to be done before, during, and after a disaster. So, for example, before a disaster occurs, those 10 people can do a proper survey and assessment of their jurisdiction within that 4-kilometer radius of a particular point. And of course, this will be based on demographics, terrain, etc., population. Everything has to be taken into account, and therefore collate information that is provided to us on the executive management perspective, whereby we can provide certain information through to the disaster management centers as and when requested, or as and when planning is taking place, and that includes the integrated development plan, etc., as outlined within the National Disaster Management Framework. That being said, during a disaster, this is a different ballgame altogether, because now during a disaster, what will happen is, firstly, in a particular area that's affected, the chances that we've got 10 volunteers who are capable to, in actual fact, do anything might not exist. They might be injured or killed, for that matter. And therefore, the neighboring jurisdiction or group of volunteers in the jurisdiction next door to that particular area might, in actual fact, have to come into the area and carry out relief operations, which, with all relief operations, it starts with an assessment. You don't just rush in blind and start treating people, because today we find that people will, in actual fact, oh, this guy here has got a broken leg, we'll treat him, but the guy next to him has actually got a rebar stuck through his chest, and he needs more immediate attention. It's called triage. However, within triage, we do get to the point of saying, well, you know, despite the injuries, priority 1 can be considered a priority 4 patient. And I know a lot of people put messages out, a P4 means deceased. Actually, a P4 means that based on the number of rescuers in relation to the number of injured, the likelihood of saving a particular patient that might be considered P1, they are put into the P4 category, so that other patients with a higher capability of saving a life are actually put in. It's a very difficult, complex, and even emotional thing that people don't like to talk about or like to consider. But that's just the way it is. In order for us to be able to save as many lives as possible across the board, rather save 50 lives and lose 5 than save 5 people and lose 50. That is the general concept between triaging of patients during large-scale events where you have a limited number of rescuers. So now, that being said, the second team comes in of volunteers, and they'll do the assessment of the area. They will determine, you know, based on this is what is needed very quickly, because of the fact people are working together as volunteers and there is teamwork. That information can be fed through to the National Disaster Management Center, provincial or even municipal, or even the region, you know, the regional team that might arrive on the outskirts of the disaster zone. And the overall coordination, the providing of relevant resources, and that entire planning process is therefore carried out. So that is the concept of where we will come in. Now, post-disaster, naturally, volunteers are going to start fading out and being phased out of the overall relief operation, because this is where the government has to step in and start the rebuilding and restructuring of the community, and they take over from that point onwards. So that is the general concept and purpose of why we have put together Disaster Relief CERT, the concept, and are implementing it throughout the country, taking a bit of time, but it is something that is in actual fact growing. What happens in this R8.50 petrol increase scenario when we don't have that kind of disaster taking place? Well, this is where the community members within a particular area need to keep they become the ears and eyes on the ground of their local community. So, cascading events. No fuel, or no money for fuel. Therefore, no transport. Not being able to get to work. Not being able to generate an income, not be able to buy food. Now we got households that are going to start running into food problems. And these are now requests that are going to start coming through on social media reports. And if we go back to the COVID-19 situation, Italy in particular, where the elderly, for example, the most vulnerable of our population, were unable to go out and purchase food. The younger generation would in actual fact arrive using ropes and buckets. They would provide these elderly people with food. In some cases, the elderly did contribute out of their pensions, but in other cases, donations were in actual fact received, and these youngsters would in actual fact provide them with the necessary food in order to sustain life. Again, this is an area where Disaster Relief CERT volunteers could in actual fact assist. And I say could because it's going to depend on the circumstances. It's going to depend on how badly impacted people are. Firstly, people need to reach out to other family members, etc., etc. Otherwise, we're going to put a lot of strain on resources, not just from a Disaster Relief CERT perspective, but from other community-based organizations or CBOs or NGOs or other relief operators that might step into the area at any particular time. In addition to that, we also need to be able to watch out for another group of vulnerable persons, and these are the people that might be on medical equipment that are reliant on electricity, or in some cases might be reliant on the purchase of diesel or fuel to run a generator in order to keep their life-saving equipment operational. And through the participation within all the various WhatsApp groups, by creating awareness, by being present, by feeding the community information, the community is also able to feed information back and say, you know, Jane Doe next door to me, they're having a problem, the grandfather's on life support, they don't have fuel, whatever the case might be. Through our Disaster Relief CERT and other CBO or NGO relief organizations in the area could in actual fact then decide on some plan of action to be able to assist them or whatever the case might be. And in a worst case scenario, for example, through our networking with various fire, ambulance, medical rescue services, through our own internal and external grouping structures, we could in actual fact become a point where the raising of wellness checks or welfare checks are posted to the groups in a far quicker and a better manner of getting medical assistance out to these vulnerable people that might be on the life support systems. And I need to take it a step further. It is our plan and intention that all Disaster Relief CERT volunteers should in actual fact be equipped with two-way radio equipment, which is why we do have a two-way radio network that is available to be deployed and in order to assist communities. Preferably each and every single Disaster Relief CERT volunteer should own and be in possession of their own two-way radio equipment. And I'm not talking about equipment now that is in actual fact made available to other organizations like CPFs, etc., etc. But this is specifically for disaster relief CERT volunteers to be able to communicate through to the executive management structure specific information which doesn't in actual fact relate to private security service providers who should have their own network, or to neighborhood watchers, block watchers, CPFs, etc. If they got their network, it's totally separate. It's a different function of the overall assistance being provided into the area. So from that perspective, again, we need to look at the cascading event with regards to the peril of no fuel, okay, or extremely high costs of fuel. Where do we come in? Well, as I said, here again, no fuel, no electricity. No electricity, WhatsApp is not going to work. That's the bottom line. In certain areas, you're going to find that, well, we saw it in Phoenix in particular during the 2021 civil unrest. We saw it in Knysna in 2017 as well, that the cell phone towers were damaged due to the fires, or in the case of Phoenix, due to the civil unrest. In the case of no electricity, cell phone towers are going to die. Therefore, no WhatsApp, no Signal, no Telegram, no SMSs, no telephone calls. That's why there's a need to have specific two-way radio equipment. As I said yesterday on the group that raised this question, that this is a complex situation. It is not a Kentucky Fried Chicken takeaway. Drive-through takeaway process. It doesn't work like that, and people are expecting instantaneous answers. And if they don't get an instantaneous one-word answer, then it adds no value. Unfortunately, there's a lot of value to be added for those skeptics out there. And it is on this basis that community members need to be positioned to receive information such as that I have just put out in this voice note, and that it is not shut down by a handful of people, because that is denying the local community the right to information, or in terms of the early warning for all initiative that has now been launched in South Africa of people receiving early warnings. A simple message such as group administrators, responsible group administrators understand that emergency messages must be given priority in a group. That's not an advert. That is in actual fact an infographic which is providing an early warning. Because without that, a person who posts a message that they've got a medical problem or they need medical assistance and it gets deleted off of the group or whatever the case might be, can cost somebody their lives. So I hope this makes a little bit of sense. 30 minutes in. Let's have a look and see how we do with creating the text document of this. I trust everybody as well. Also, I don't think I gave my telephone number. Anybody that has got any further questions or would like to become involved or require any additional information, as I said, my name is Chad Milam. I'm one of the directors of Disaster Relief CERT. CERT being the Community Emergency Response Teams volunteer network, and my telephone number is 082 859 2684. Cheers all.